You need to prepare a way out not when you smell smoke, but while it's still calm, while the doors are open, while it's still your free choice and not a panicked escape. Build an emergency exit. Put one foot on your own ground, and if, God forbid it comes to it, move the other foot there as well. One of the recognized geniuses of the 20th century was named Alexander Arkhach Galish. In the 1970s, the leadership of the Soviet Union threw out a whole group of people who, in their view, were interfering with their efforts to build a bright future in their own families. We know all their names. Well, some of them are Iosif Brodsky, Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Galich, Viktor Nekrasov, Sinyavsky, Akshanov, Voinovich, Leshkovsky, Dovlatov, Limonov, Karjavin, Korzavin, and a few others. It seems like quite a list. For foreign policy reasons, they couldn't kill them or put them in prison or a mental hospital for a long time, so they decided to get rid of them. But they miscalculated, because that very same Alexander Koch immediately went to work for Radio Liberty in Paris and started to become even 100 times more popular in his former homeland than that radio had ever been before exile, before emigration. Previously, only the intelligentsia knew about him, but now young people were singing his songs, repeating his verses. Galich was practically on the level of a prophet of civilization's development. It seems that's why the KGB killed him in his own apartment in Paris. I can't say that I have proof, but in 1937, the French government promised to reveal, supposedly, all the details of this most bizarre case. The electrocution of the great poet in his own bathtub. Why do I say that he was a prophet, like the Delphic oracle, Nostradamus, and Cassandra, all at once? Now listen to these lines about America. Gentlemen, this was probably about 70 years before it started happening. These very lines. We will build houses all across America. Ordinary houses, houses of culture.
Пускай.
Let them spend a little time in our shoes, and maybe that will make them a bit wiser. Well, some people say he wrote it, some say he didn't, but he did write it. Today I want to recall another quatrain that directly concerns us. And unfortunately, it concerns us not in Hitler's Germany, not in Stalin's communist state, but in the United States of America. And today, right now, here is this quatrain. Oh, don't sow, you Jews. Don't try to become chamberlains, you Jews, Jews in livery. Don't grieve over the green of suspicions, lament. You won't sit in the Synod or the Senate. If you take what he said literally, then he was kind of mistaken. There are 9 Jews in the Senate today. I want to say right away that all of them are Democrats. Most of them call themselves democratic socialists, or without calling themselves that, they promote the same principles, but they don't follow the Torah or Hillel or the Old Testament. What they follow is Karl Marx. Although they themselves really love personal property, and as much of it as possible. Well, now that I've said that, let's dive into our current American reality. And to understand it, let's start with Europe. With its German-speaking part from around 1900 to approximately 1935, the invited speaker took the stage in a packed hall in Munich and addressed the Jews sitting before him. He spoke without raising his voice and without trying to be overly dramatic. He said that very soon all of them would be killed, not unbelievably, and very soon. These children, these women in fancy dresses, these gentlemen in nice suits, almost all of them will die, unless they pack up and leave. This is happening in 1935, gentlemen, and as soon as possible. It would have been nice if the hall had really burst out laughing yesterday, but very soon they were all killed. All of them. They laughed at him in Warsaw, in Berlin, in Vienna, and in dozens of cities where he came again and again, like a man running through a sleeping house, banging on every door. And they called him an arsonist, a madman who scares decent people. But he stood there and kept repeating the same thing, leave. While the doors are open, leave. His name was, well, you know his name very well, Vladimir Zev Jabotinsky. Almost everyone who laughed at him was sent to concentration camps and burned there. The children didn't have time to grow up. The plans didn't have time to come true. They killed everyone. Those very children, those very women in their fancy dresses, those very gentlemen in their fine suits, everyone. Can you blame those who laughed for anything? No, of course not. Of course not. But that was recent. We can't just dismiss it and claim that could never happen here. What do you mean it won't happen? Because if there are signals that we receive, and if they are in any way similar to what happened in Germany in the mid-1930s, then we must treat them with the utmost seriousness. Jews were killed to the ecstatic howls of the people, the very same people who used to buy sausage from the Jews, order suits from them, and tip their hats when they met, who loved the same music, whose children read the same poems about Lorelei, and dreamed of the same things that Jewish children dreamed of. All these very same people were shouting with joy when the Jews were being killed. They were convinced that all their misfortunes were caused by these very Jews, and along with the Jews, their Jewish children. And that's why they were happy that these children were being taken away and burned. Just for pleasure, they dragged out that very shopkeeper from whom they had been buying sausage for 20 years. They dragged them out into the street and kicked them to death. Because, well, these very Jews were the evil that kept them from getting what they wanted. And what did they want? Everything that the Jews had, because it turns out the Jews got it through our sweat and blood. I want to talk to you today about this laughter, because it seems to me that I hear it again. I'm afraid that I hear it very close to me. Already in the 1930s, Batinsky was doing what almost no one else did. He traveled around Jewish Europe, and he said things that no one wanted to hear. He said, liquidate the galut. Galut means diaspora. Before the galut destroys you, gather together. Gather in the state of Israel, which did not yet exist. It sounds harsh, but he was calling them to salvation. He said, I see what you can't see from the inside. I look at your life from the outside with a cool head, and I see how the walls around you are slowly closing in. What did he get in response? They just didn't listen to him. They booed him. Respected Jewish newspapers wrote that this man was a disgrace to enlightened Jewry. They called him hysterical. He played into the hands of anti-Semites with his talk about fleeing. Wise rabbis shook their heads. Wealthy, well-established, confident people all explained to him condescendingly, as if to a child. Well, you're just behind the times. This is the 20th century. This is Germany, the most cultured country in Europe. Goethe, Beethoven, nothing. Nothing like what you're trying to scare us with. Nothing. A kiss. They say that after one of these trips, Jabotinsky remarked with a bitter smile that he never suspected Jews could be so hopelessly stupid. He was hated for trying to disrupt their peaceful, comfortable, and wonderful way of life in one of the most cultured countries in the world. And here's the question I want you to answer, to think about, to pause, because he saw very clearly why an entire people, intelligent, educated, well-read, did not see, while he did. And it wasn't because he was smarter, but because he was looking from the outside. There is an old observation: a fish does not know what water is. It lives in it. It breathes in it. Water is not an object for it, but an environment, something taken for granted. If you ask a fish about water, it won't understand the question. In the same way, a person who lives inside a situation doesn't see its outlines. He breathes in it. For him, it's not a situation. It's just life, ordinary, familiar, the same as yesterday. Come on, what are you talking about? Everything is just the same. A German Jew in 1933 didn't see the catastrophe. He didn't see his street, his shop, his neighbors whom he had greeted for 20 years. He saw his son, a student, his daughter at the piano, a season ticket to the opera. How could something monstrous, what you're talking about, grow out of all this, out of a normal, warm, familiar life? What are you talking about? It just doesn't add up. Individual troubling details just don't register, and they don't come together into a single picture, because between these details stands an entire life that has been lived. And it whispers, calm down, it's not what you think. And then comes the scariest part. That's when, well, for each of us, yes, a person starts talking themselves into it with all their might. They find 1,000 sensible reasons why everything will work out, right? Well, this is just a temporary madness. It will pass. Oh, that's what fringe people say. Decent people think differently. We assimilate, after all. It's not like we're some kind of Moseses, too. We live, and there are too many of us. We're too necessary. The economy can't function without us. And what is the economy without you? Will it collapse without you? Each argument on its own sounds reasonable, but together they add up to a lullaby, one that is so sweet to fall asleep to. It's so sweet not to see what's happening. Jabotinsky wasn't under this lullaby. That's why he could hear the walls shifting, and he himself heard the music. Sometimes it was a waltz and sometimes Wagner's Victory March, but it was music all the same. And now I'm going to ask you to do something unpleasant. Take a look at your own street, at your news feed, and ask yourself honestly, do you hear it now? Or do you still feel like everything is perfectly fine? Let me tell you what I see, and I won't start with today's news feed. I'll rewind a bit. Not 100 years back, of course. I wasn't alive then. Just 15 years. During Obama's first term, I want you to focus not on individual sparks, but on how the forest slowly dries out year after year. Everyone notices the spark, but no one notices the forest drying out, not until it catches fire. So, 2010. Helen Thomas, a legend, the oldest member of the Washington Press Corps, a woman who sat in the front row for 8 presidents, and she's asked about the Jews of Israel, and she answers, calmly on camera, let them go home, to Poland, to Germany, a 70-year career. And then this. She was in America, in the White House. She covered 8 presidents. Well, all right, we stayed silent. We winced. An old woman who lost her mind, right? A one-off case. We scrolled past. 2017. Charlottesville. People are walking down the street of an American city with torches, and they're chanting, Jews will not replace us. Are we supposed to replace them or something? Where did this come from? Well, they could have just stayed in the basement, but no. They walked down the street, with cameras, the whole world watching. Of course you were shocked, but you told yourself, lunatics, this isn't America, and you moved on. October 27, 2018, Pittsburgh. A man goes to the synagogue, Tree of Life, right in the middle of the Sabbath service, and he shoots 11 people point blank. Elderly people who came to pray. The deadliest attack on Jews in the entire history of the United States. This isn't something you can just scroll past so easily, but a year or two went by. Memory faded. The year 2019. Member of the United States Congress, Ilhan Omar, explained support for Israel in one sentence. Yeah, it's all about the Benjamins. Money. I mean, Benjamins are what you call $100 bills. That same old story. Jews, money, secret power. And you told yourself again, well, she just blurted it out. Well, she apologized, right? But besides, there are also many Jews in her party. They won't allow it. You decided not to notice that the Jews in her party stayed silent. They stayed silent. And the silence, in every sense of the word, was deathly. 2022, Kanye West, one of probably the most famous people on the planet, who had more followers than some countries have citizens, declares that he admires Hitler and doesn't believe for a second that the Holocaust happened. Tens of millions of people are listening to this. They called it the act of a madman and just scrolled past, but tens of millions of people who adore him heard it. And they didn't decide it was the act of a madman, and they didn't scroll past. Then October 7th, 2023 happened, and what had been drying out for years caught fire. Remember the universities? You know, the temples of reason, right? Where a Jewish student now hides the Star of David under his t-shirt just to enter the classroom. At Columbia, the protest leader says out loud, Zionists do not deserve the right to live. Not Jews, he says, Zionists. And what are Zionists? And then you suddenly discover that Zionists are Jews. Jews who believe that Jews should have their own country, a state, their own land where they could, so to speak, settle and defend themselves. And they think that this land should be somewhere around Mount Zion. So the word is new, but the meaning is still the same. Jews do not deserve the right to live. So what should we do with them? UCLA Jewish students are not allowed into their own classrooms, being checked at the entrance, just like at a checkpoint back in the day. Are you a Zionist? And depending on the answer, they either let you in or not. In other words, you're Jewish. If yes, then you won't be allowed in. The last time I remember something like this was probably in 1936 in that same Munich we've already talked about, and Congress is voting. Should the slogan "From the river to the sea" be considered anti-Semitic? And 44 lawmakers vote against it. And do you know what "from the river to the sea" means? Everyone knows that. It's not just from the river to the sea. It means there shouldn't be a single Jew. They must be killed, stabbed, thrown out, cast away, burned, or drowned in the sea. Between the river and the sea. You know, between the river and the sea, right? Choose for yourself, as they say. We have freedom. Pick whatever you want from the options offered. Want to be burned? Go ahead. Want to be shot? Easy. Want to be stabbed? All with pleasure. And 44 members of the U.S. Congress say they don't see anything wrong with that. Well, what's so bad about that, right? It's Jews who will be targeted, not someone else. Ladies and gentlemen, do you also think everything is perfectly fine? Sparks have already started flying, turning into a fire. Well, and it's also very convenient not to notice it. By the way, speaking of the fire, in April of 25, they set fire to the residence of the governor of Pennsylvania. Josh Shapiro, the last name is kind of, a bit Jewish, right? He's Yuri, sleeping inside with his family. It's a little thing, but it makes someone happy. May 25th. At the Jewish Museum in Washington, 2 young employees of the Israeli embassy, Yaron and Sarah, are shot at point-blank range. According to reports, he was planning to propose to her. June 25th. Boulder, California, Colorado. A man with a firearm and incendiary mixture rushes at a peaceful rally for the release of hostages. Free our loved ones. Free the hostages. Shouting, "Freedom for Palestine, October 25th. That's how it seems. He sits down with Nick Fuentes, a Holocaust denier, for a 2-hour friendly conversation. 20 million views. October 27th was the day of the massacre in Pittsburgh. And when the scandal broke out, the argument wasn't about whether it was vile, everyone agreed it was, but about whether it was appropriate for officials to call it vile. In other words, you can say it, but you can't condemn it. This isn't even just anti-Semitism anymore. It's already beyond that. December 25th, Kendi Sovan, millions of listeners. They recommend them a book from the century before last about Jews and explain to Black Americans who their real enemy is. Not white people. Jews. And what kind of book is it, you might ask? I think they brought up the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, no? Don't you agree? Under the Russian czars, well, a bit anti-Semitic. They decided to have some fun and write such a book, to start a series of pogroms in Russia. But the answer to that was the revolution, into which this book and other efforts by the Tsarist government pushed the Jewish youth. I'm not saying that the Great October Revolution was something positive. I'm just explaining that when Jews are cornered, they fight back. And usually they succeed. And in the spring of 26, a dry line of statistics comes out. Actual physical attacks on Jews are higher than ever before. 15 years. Otherwise, the old woman has lost her mind, up to the shot bride and groom near the museum. Did you notice in which exact year the forest managed to dry out? And now do something you don't usually do. Don't listen to all of this separately. Let's put all of this, as they say, together in one room. On the right, they say, Jews control everything. On the left, they say, Jews buy everything. And on campus, they say it outright. Jews don't deserve to live. And notice they've all changed their clothes. The word anti-Semitism isn't very fashionable these days. It smells of gas chambers. People are ashamed to say it. That's why hatred, as they say, changed its coat for a frock coat. Now it's called anti-Zionism. Anti-colonialism, or just criticism of the state of Israel. 3 different outfits. But under the outfit, it's the same statement, which the world has already heard once and once finished saying, Jews should not live. And to the person who hid the Star of David under their t-shirt, it doesn't matter what flag that hand was raised under. Whether the fist came from the left or right, it still hit the same face. This isn't a basement whisper anymore. It's the country's biggest podcasts, the capital, and America's top universities. From top to bottom, left to right. For now, they're just words. Let me stop speaking in general terms. I'll name names, from both sides. And you pay attention to just one thing. What happened to these people for speaking? Because there are always some idiots out there who hate someone, love someone, or do things for political reasons. Some do it out of self-interest, some out of stupidity. Those aren't the important ones. Fringe, as it's called, right? The important thing is the reaction. When it's there, well, guys, everything's fine. What can you do? Anti-Semitism was, is, and always will be. Racism was, is, and always will be. Scoundrels and the chosen ones, and so on. But when society doesn't react, let's start with the law. So we're not just talking in generalities. Candace Owens, one of the most popular conservative commentators. Well, in America at least, right? Millions of followers. She likes a tweet where a rabbi is asked if he has drunk Christian blood again. Blood. That very story, the one over which entire Jewish communities were once massacred. The girl is educated, so she knows exactly what she's doing. Marjorie Taylor Greene, a sitting member of Congress, a Republican. She was, well, now she's no longer in Congress. So to speak, basically, because of Trump, she was forced to leave. He put serious pressure on her. But I think about this matter. She explained the wildfires in California by saying they were caused by a space laser connected to Rothschild bankers. Why did she have to tell the world that Jews are secretly setting fires? Well, I swear, I don't know. By the way, why would Jews need to set fires? That's also completely unclear if they own everything, right? They've taken over, they own everything, and so on. Why would they set fire to their own property? Well, maybe to get insurance from themselves, actually. But, you know, the main thing is, I don't remember anyone really shutting her down or calling her out. Now Mel Gibson. Well, everyone knows him, one of the most famous people in Hollywood. Quote, Jews are to blame for all the wars in the world. Later, he said that he was drunk. The reaction from politicians was zero. Hollywood keeps making movies with him. I don't have that kind of problem. He brings in money, cash, bucks. I once said while serving, in the Leningrad City Council, Vladimir Vladimirovich. That's Putin. I mean, yes. Money. And since he brings in money, old ladies, it means he can say whatever he wants. And directors, producers, and screenwriters of Jewish nationality, those will also film him. And investors of the same Jewish nationality will invest. Not only them, no, by no means, but them too. Why? They bring money. It's not that Jews are the only ones who would, as they say, sell their own skin for money. No, it's just, well, comradeship. It's like it stopped being that horror that makes you recoil from a person and say, oh my God. Yeah, it's like keep a 6-meter pole away from it, as they say. I wouldn't touch it. I wouldn't even sit in the same field to do anything there. Deshaun Jackson, an American football star, posts on his page, Jews, so how's it going? The Jews have a plan to enslave America? The Jews have a plan to enslave America. How does he know? Probably some Jew shared it with him. But who put this idea into his head seriously, right? And did he even think for a second before repeating it? And then, so to speak, chaos started around him because of this. His clan, his club fined him, penalized him. The League reprimanded him. Jewish human rights organizations condemned him, but not a single word from any Democratic politicians. Not one, not a single one, right? I searched for a long time, and gentlemen, he is not a minor figure. It's not like I'm going to react to this, right? Millions listen to him, but what happens on the right, that's nothing. All right, a little warm-up. Now on the left, and here I ask you to pay close attention, because these aren't bloggers, not actors, not athletes. This is Congress, Ilhan Omar. Oh, Mar. A member of the House of Representatives, a Democrat. She puts the only Jewish country in the world on the same level as who? Hamas and the Taliban. 12 Democrats. Well, judging by their actions, 12 Democrats condemned her. 2 colleagues, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Tlaib, on the contrary, rushed to defend her. The result, and she's still in Congress today. According to congressional rules, 2/3 must vote to expel a member of Congress, and then they're out, right? In Congress, where one's own seat and party affiliation are more valuable than anything else, you won't find 2/3 on this issue. But if you vote, say, to limit their term in Congress, that also requires 2/3. There you'd get 95%, if not 99. They will never find two-thirds, not even close. So Rache, yes, this Rache and Tlaib, also a member of the House, also a Democrat, publicly supports the slogan "From the river to the sea." But you and I already know what that means. It's not like nobody knows that. Well, that's the official slogan and explanation of both Hamas and, anyone else, Iran included, about what it means, right? And you and I, understand exactly that between the Jordan and the sea, all the Jews have to be driven out. But she gets a reprimand. It sounds serious, right? Yeah? A reprimand is just a piece of paper. She didn't lose her seat. And by the way, only 22 Democrats weren't afraid to vote for that reprimand. Only 22 Democrats out of all of them weren't afraid to vote. Half of Congress are Democrats. The rest turned away. Believe me, there are more than 22 Jews in Congress, for example. So some of the Jews also look the other way. They need to be judged to get out of Congress. Do we have the right? We do have the right, but we don't have the will. Because the needs of the party are above everything else. More important than honor. More important than conscience, more important than the lives of the relatives of those very people elected to Congress. Well, let's be completely honest. More important than their own children. So, and by party, of course, I mean the soft cushion on the seat where they sit. A cozy spot. Money, fame. Well, opportunities. Much more important than the lives of some Jews. Jamal Bowman. At that time, Congressman, a Democrat, called the reports of rape by Hamas in Israel on October 7 propaganda and lies. Even though Israelis came and showed a film in Congress, presented evidence, footage simply recorded by cameras that were on the chest, head, or in the hands of Hamas members. No, this is propaganda, slander, and lies. Yes, he later apologized, yes. But that's all that happened. I don't remember a single associate, even a Jewish Democrat, who would have called him a crooked bastard. Well, I mean, something like, "Oh no." And that's it, we moved on, kept going. Yes, then a whole brigade, a squad, as they're called, Lee, Presley, the same Omar, the same Tlaib, Ocasio-Cortez. Congress votes for a resolution against anti-Semitism, and they vote against the resolution. A resolution that condemns anti-Semitism. And what happened to them? Well, take a guess, please. Kaimani James was the leader of the protests at Columbia University. Right into the camera, word for word. I'm comfortable calling for the death of these people. I think there should be something about that in our Constitution, right? By these people, she meant Zionists, as she said earlier, and she adds, "Be thankful that I'm not going around killing." Wow, wow. Thank you so much. A huge, heartfelt thank you. Was he being followed? If he had said that Muslims should be killed, then he would have been persecuted. Well, maybe because the Jews are themselves to blame, or what? And you think so too, right? If not, then why do you elect all of them to Congress? To the Senate as governors? To the presidency? Susan Sarandon is a Hollywood star, an Oscar winner, speaking from the podium at a rally in New York, declares, "American Jews who are now afraid. For the first time in their lives, they are beginning to understand what it's like to be a Muslim in this country." She's gone nuts. For 2,000 years straight, Jews were slaughtered, killed, raped, robbed, everything imaginable was done to them. But now the Jews, need to understand what it's like to be a Muslim in this country. I don't recall Muslims being denied jobs, or being refused admission to universities, or being written about, called for something, I don't know, something like that. Maybe not being taken into the army or not being promoted. "Oh, you're a Muslim, then we won't promote you," or something like that, right? Well, that's just great. They're starting to understand what it's like to be a Muslim in this country, the politicians. You probably think that now, well, you can do anything you want, or that no one will notice anything about you. None of them demanded that that crooked jerk or whatever, get out of our country. Whatever. They stayed silent. Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York. A Democrat, he's repeatedly asked to condemn it. The slogan is, globalize the Intifada. What is Intifada? The massacre of Jews. Globalize means to kill Jews all over the world. He refuses. He doesn't say it himself. Well, and he won't condemn it, so to speak. And he doesn't want to condemn others either. To be fair, the leader of the Democrats in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, also from New York, did say that you can't say things like that, you just can't. Well, go ahead. Well, don't say that, please. Oh, and there are two more non-Americans, you know. The whole of America hears them. Mark Lamont Hill, a well-known professor and TV host, takes the podium, the UN podium. All of this is broadcast here, of course, and he says that very phrase, from the river to the sea. CNN, and at that time he was a consultant or something like that, they call it a contributor. Yes, they were forced to fire him even though they really didn't want to. And Roger Waters, a legend, yes, one of the founding members of Pink Floyd, at a concert raises an inflatable pig with the Star of David into the sky and comes out on stage dressed in a Nazi-style outfit, yes. And do you know where he did this? Out of all the cities on the planet where they performed, he did this in Berlin. And now, the reason I set up this whole sequence. There. Don't listen to the words. Look at the score, the blood libel. They drink the blood of Christian infants and they are taking over the whole planet. We've seen this before, right? A laser from the Rothschilds, right there, sitting in Congress. And nothing happens. The Jews are blamed for all the wars. And instead of condemnation, new roles, smiles, pats on the back, ingratiation. Israel is put on the same level as terrorists. They do everything the same way, again from the U.S. Congress. And you throw it into the sea. Instead of punishment, there's encouragement and rape. This is a lie spreading worldwide. And then a brief, oh, sorry, by the way, I made a mistake there. Yes. They voted against the resolution on anti-Semitism. A bunch of people abstained or voted against. And silence. It didn't become the biggest event of the year or the century. No, silence, a pattern. It's noticeable if an anti-Semite from another party is being discussed, and they condemn him. What if it's someone from their party? Well, maybe they'll force out some routine phrase through their teeth, something like, and then they'll accept the apology, or that the wheel keeps turning, moving on. But the ending is always the same. People in America today don't lose their jobs for anti-Semitism. People in America don't get kicked out of Congress for anti-Semitism. In Congress, they don't even lose internal positions there, the kind you can routinely lose. But if you say something bad about any other group of people, about Jews, yes, maybe they're really to blame themselves. They don't even get labeled after their career ends, just a mild reprimand at most. You know, in a friendly way, like a father or a mother would. At worst, they'll write up a paper and then let it go. Silently, they say, go ahead, anti-Semitism in the U.S. is no longer a crime. It's becoming more and more mainstream. That is allowed and almost accepted. An accepted form of relationships within our society. An accepted form of attitude towards Jews. And what would have sounded absolutely impossible 20 years ago to an audience of millions, a black host now says to the audience, addressing black people, it's not white people who are your enemies, but Jews. She isn't quartered, no. She isn't put on trial, she isn't tarred and feathered, and she isn't thrown out of the community. She continues to be accepted. And that's terrible. That's what's terrible. In Germany in the 30s, too. At first, people just let it slide, like, yeah, whatever. And then it became the norm. And as soon as it became the norm, it was all over, and it all began. Now try to stop it. You've heard each of these stories separately. You shrugged, scrolled past, but now they're all lined up in a row for you. I really hope that something inside you clicked. I never put them together. I thought they were just separate crazy news stories. But they're not separate stories. It's the same smoke coming from different windows of the same house. And that house is ours, yours, and mine. I want you to understand me correctly, because this is very important. I'm not saying that everyone around is bad. I'm not saying that Americans are anti-Semites. or that Europeans are anti-Semites, that your neighbor, God forbid, wishes you harm. That's not true. I don't believe that. I'm talking about something else, about a mechanism. History shows the same thing, with frightening consistency. Most people in any country are ordinary, normal, not evil. No, they just want to be left alone. They want their children to be fed. They want tomorrow to be no worse than yesterday. Well, and today too, if possible. But when serious forces, not street thugs but serious forces, begin systematically turning the people against a certain group, everything changes at a frightening speed. And it's the speed that scares you. A group is always chosen based on one principle. It has to be noticeable and convenient to attack, to direct anger at, right? The rich, outsiders, people of a different faith, those who can be made out to be the cause. Because a person who is suffering needs an explanation, someone to blame for living a life worse than they dreamed of. If day after day someone is pointed out to them and told, there they are, that's who you need to blame. Sooner or later a tired, hurt person will nod. Not because they're a villain, but because they've been given someone to blame, and it becomes a little easier. It's not my fault. It's him who's to blame. And it's in that very second when ordinary people start to believe that that group over there is the reason for their troubles, the fire ignites. Instantly. A house that seemed to be made of stone turns out to be made of straw, and it burns down faster than you can pack your suitcase. But the Jews should know this fire by heart. We've seen it so many times that we should be able to smell the smoke before anyone else in the world. So why do we keep standing there, sniffing the air, convincing ourselves that it's just the neighbors grilling kebabs? And before I tell you what all this is for, I have one request. These next words. Listen to them not as a viewer, listen to them as a Jew. I'm addressing you now. To the Jew who is watching this video, wherever you live. New York, Los Angeles, London, Paris, Berlin, Kiev, Moscow, Sydney, Tbilisi. Maybe you haven't thought about being Jewish in a long time. Maybe for you, this word is just a line in a form, that's all. Your grandfather's last name, the recipe your grandmother used to cook. Maybe you go to the synagogue once a year, on Yom Kippur, or maybe you don't even do that. You stand there, you listen, and you leave with the feeling that this is where your Jewishness ends. You've paid your dues, you've settled accounts with your ancestors, and now you're free for another year. I have to tell you something unpleasant. Just because you've forgotten about your Jewishness doesn't mean others will forget about it. The moment someone points a finger at you, no one will ask if you went to synagogue, if you believe in God, if you feel Jewish, which party you belong to, on which meetings or whatever, what songs you sang. They'll check your documents, your last name, and your face, then decide everything for you. In a pogrom, your faith doesn't matter. That's enough. Your name is enough. In the Soviet Union, they said it wasn't your passport but your face that got you beaten. They also beat you because of your face. And because of your passport too, of course. But they check your passport. And if you don't care about yourself, and I know that many of you really don't care about yourselves, you've lived your life, you're tired of being afraid, then think not about yourself but about your children, about those who still have their lives ahead of them, who still have to raise their own children, who have a future. The only question is where. And here's what I suggest. Don't panic. Don't drop everything tomorrow morning. Don't burn bridges. I suggest something much calmer and I think much wiser. Build an emergency exit. You know, every plane you fly on has an emergency exit. In the air, it's not very important, right? Well, but if it's not in the air, then it's important. You hardly ever look at it. In 99 out of 100 cases, we won't need it. But it's exactly because it's there that you feel more at ease when you fly. An emergency exit isn't about fear, it's about the freedom not to be afraid. So I suggest that each of you build such an exit in Israel. You don't have to drop everything and move there right now with all your belongings. Start with 1 foot. Just put 1 foot forward. Put your foot on Israeli soil and the weight of your body can follow later if needed. For now, leave it where you live. What does that mean in practice? Get your citizenship. You have the right to it by virtue of being born a Jew. This right was hard-earned by our people. Don't let it gather dust. Find a place to live there, rent or buy. Secure some square meters that are waiting for you. Send your children. Let them study there for a year, learn the language. Let them get to know the country that will accept them at any moment. No questions asked. open a bank account, contacts, some kind of foothold, maybe a couple of friends. Well, like, hey, do you remember you and I? Make sure you always have a second foot firmly planted on Israeli soil. And then, if God forbid, where you live starts to burn, you won't have to run and panic to a closed door like people did in the 30s. All you'll need to do is shift your entire weight onto the foot that's already standing on solid ground, calmly and with dignity, like someone who was prepared. That's the difference between a refugee and someone in control of their own fate. A refugee rushes out when everything is already burning, but someone in control has already prepared a way out. So you should be nervous, but not like when you have nothing prepared. Now you might be asking yourself, why do you think it will catch fire? Maybe everything will be fine. Maybe. I sincerely, with all my heart, hope that everything will be fine. I want to be wrong. There is nothing I would be happier about than being wrong in this video. Well, I look at the facts, and facts, as they say, are stubborn things. Germany, Goethe, Kant, the most cultured country in Europe, has shown what a cultured country is capable of. France, the homeland of freedom, the Bastille, equality, brotherhood, showed its true colors in the Dreyfus Affair, and the world saw how quickly brotherhood forgets about Jews. Poland, Ukraine, Russia with its pogroms, the Baltics, and many other countries where this happened. And not just once. Only a few small countries stood firm. Denmark, which at night, on fishing boats, ferried its Jews to safety. Bulgaria, by the way, which did not give up its own, deep respect and eternal gratitude to them. But did you notice you can count them on your fingers? To resist is the exception, but to catch fire, as it turned out, is the rule. And now I want you to hear everything I said, without taking offense, without illusions. America was the best home Jews from Russia ever had. I say this with love and gratitude to this country, but that's exactly why it's so hard to see here. It's too good, too warm, too much like that very Germany which turned out to be eternal. The cozier the home, the quieter the lullaby, and the harder it is to hear someone striking a match behind the wall. And now let me finish not with fear. I started with fear so that you would listen. But I still want to let you go, with hope and light. Because this story has a side that warms my own heart. Imagine for a moment a people who have an emergency exit, each and every one of them. A people who will never again, you hear me, never again stand in front of a closed door with a suitcase in their hands. A people who can't be cornered because they always have somewhere to shift their weight. Do you know what's happening? The people are no longer afraid. A people that stops being afraid is already a completely different people. It's hard to blackmail him. It's impossible to humiliate him. You have to talk to him as an equal. Because at any moment he can get up and go home. And for the first time in 2,000 years, we have this home. Think about what kind of power that is. Not the power of weapons, but the power of a free man who has his own land under his feet. For 2,000 years our ancestors prayed, Bashana, Bashana, Baba, Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, without having a single chance to get there. But what if you have a chance in your pocket right now, and you don't need to pray for a miracle, you just need to buy a ticket? And imagine what Israel would become if we all built a second foothold there. Everyone who comes will bring their labor, their intelligence, their talents, their children, doctors, engineers, teachers, musicians, entrepreneurs, a country that grew gardens in the desert. What will it grow if we all invest in it, not just with words, but with ourselves? And this is not a sacrifice, ladies and gentlemen. It's the best investment of your life. An emergency exit, one that you build and, God willing, never have to use. It will pay off anyway. It will pay off with every night of peaceful sleep. It will pay off in the fact that your children will grow up to be people who cannot be backed into a corner. Jabotinsky knocked on doors, but no one opened for him. I'm not Jabotinsky, but this story is not entirely abstract for me. According to our family legends, Jabotinsky's son, Eri, was married to my mother's aunt from the Kogan family. And in 1922, my great-grandfather, Israel Glozman, became the principal of the Tel Hai Jewish School in Haifa. It was either the first or the second school in the north. And all those generations, that whole generation that was in the same melting pot, with future rabbins, begins, Parisis, and all sorts of Jabotinskys, argued until they were hoarse, were friends for years, and of course all ended up marrying each other. They were building the country that is now being offered to you as a ready and open home. I'm not speaking to you from a textbook, I'm speaking from my own family. So I'm not sounding the alarm, I'm not shouting run, I'm not shouting fire. I'm saying something else. The forest has dried up. The forest has dried up so much that any spark will set it ablaze and it will burn. As you've seen, the sparks are already flying. That's why you need to build an exit, not when you smell smoke, but now, while it's still relatively calm, while the doors are open, while it's still your free choice and not a panicked escape. Build an emergency exit, put one foot on your own land, and when you're ready, move the other one there too. I really hope you'll never need that exit. I really hope you'll never need that exit. But a person who has it, who possesses it, sleeps peacefully, and a people who have it no longer cry at locked doors like they did in Germany. See you tomorrow and take care of your children because whether you admit it or not, they are in danger.